Milan Momcilovic's recruitment is moving very quickly, and now the Kentucky Wildcats are predicted to land the best shooter in all of college basketball.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe. On today's episode of the show, we're going to take a look at how this year's roster compares to the first season of the Mark Pope era in Lexington. Also going to take a look at this offense. If Kentucky does land Milan Momcilovic, Pope can actually do some things that he has not been able to do so far at Kentucky. But first, we need to talk about the fact that Milan Momcilovic has been predicted to land at Kentucky, and according to other insider reports, it's coming. It might happen tonight, it might happen tomorrow, it might happen Saturday, but it's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. We might be back here live again on YouTube. If you're watching us here live on YouTube, we might be back later tonight to react officially to the news, but I wanted to get out in front of it because according to Matt Norlander, over at CBS Sports, he was the first person to predict it publicly. He said on his Eye on College Basketball podcast that Kentucky will land Milan Momcilovic. Direct quote here. My prediction right now is that Milan Momcilovic will go to Kentucky. My understanding is that the decision is going to come in the next 1, 2, 3 days, 4 days max. We'll be podcasting again on Monday, and I'm expecting when we podcast Monday for Momcilovic's commitment and his decision will be in. My forecast is that it's Kentucky, but, we'll see. We'll see if Louisville can get there. Something that Norlander also noted in that public prediction is that Arizona is in this race. St. John's is no longer in this race, but the Wildcats of Arizona are in a distant third place. It is a Kentucky versus Louisville battle. Behind a paywall over at On3, Joe Tipton reported that Kentucky is the leader. I would like to reiterate something that I've said recently on the show. If it is paywalled information that goes public on Twitter, on social media, if On3 themselves hints at it, we are going to talk about it publicly. I encourage you to go subscribe to various outlets that put this information behind paywalls if you want first access to it, but it's my job to talk about it on the show, and this is public information. Also, SB Nation's A Sea of Blue also decided to break the paywalled news, despite, again, it being something that you needed to pay for to have access to. But Joe Tipton reported earlier today that Kentucky is the leader for Milan Momcilovic, and CBS Sports' Matt Norlander predicts that he is going to land at Kentucky. Direct quote here from Joe Tipton. Sources tell me Kentucky has emerged as the current leader for Momcilovic. Mark Pope is going all out to land him, making him a top priority both on the court and financially. While the momentum is currently trending in the Wildcats' direction, I'm still not ready to rule out Louisville in this recruitment. On3 reported Wednesday evening that 4 schools were in the pursuit of the 6'8" sharpshooter: Kentucky, Louisville, Arizona, and St. John's, while also noting that sources view Louisville and Kentucky as the frontrunners with St. John's as a dark horse. However, now that Rick Pitino has landed another top transfer in Baylor's Tunde Yesufu, I no longer view the Johnnies as a serious contender for Momcilovic. I still believe Arizona is a long shot, and while Texas Tech has also been recently mentioned, it sounds like the Red Ragers face an uphill battle as well. Unless Louisville pulls out an extra few million to even themselves with the Wildcats financially, Kentucky is going to get the best shooter in the transfer portal. This would now be 2 out of the 3 off seasons Pope has been here that he will have landed the best shooter in the country. He got Kobe Brea in his first cycle, and Momcilovic would be second here. We've talked about the impact. We've talked about the statistics. We've talked about how it raises Kentucky's ceiling from borderline top 25 to knocking on the door of the top 10. That is not my opinion, although it is not exclusively, I should say. It's not exclusively my opinion. That is the opinion of Evan Mia's computer model that does not even factor in the fact that Kentucky brings back over 30% of their returning production. The model doesn't weigh that yet. It puts more value on the fact that Kentucky has that. So really, they are a top 10-ish team according to computer models that should be trusted if they do add Milan Momcilovic. If you guys see on Twitter that it has been announced while we're live here, we will discuss it, obviously. But I did want to get out in front of it and celebrate the fact that it sounds like Kentucky just simply has more money and they've got a better role than any other team that could get involved in this recruitment, and that's kind of how it's been. What a refreshing course of news here to know that Kentucky, from start to finish, had the money, had the spot, had the pitch. They had everything locked down from the jump, and Kentucky was the front runner / the biggest interest to Momcilovic from start to finish. Him doing interviews with the Herald Leader, him coming out publicly and saying Kentucky would be a very good fit for me. It makes sense financially to go there. To walk this out, if this does end well, and hopefully it does end with him in blue and white, what a refreshing close to what has been a disastrous offseason for Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats, to have missed on so many different prospects, not just in the transfer portal, but also Tyron Stokes as well. To be able to go out and get a top 10, top 5-ish transfer portal player and Milan Momcilovic, and not just some contributor, the best shooter in the country, that will do miracles for Mark Pope's offense. Miracles for Mark Pope's offense. He leads the country in projected Bayesian performance rating for 2027. He leads the nation in offensive BPR. He is second overall nationally in just flat out BPR. He is first in the country in box offensive BPR. He is first in the country in box plus minus. He is so impactful, not just because of his shooting, but because of the spacing and the gravity he will provide for this offense. Again, if he does commit, this would be huge. And Jeff Goodman said this earlier. I did a whole show on this recently. If Milan Momcilovic does end up committing to Kentucky in any time between now and Sunday evening, which is the time frame we're working with right now, according to reports, it might be the decision, the commitment, the player that ends up saving Mark Pope's job and the long-term future of this program. It could butterfly effect into something so much bigger than we're currently looking at right now, because it's not just about this season. It's about the future of this program trying to maintain their status, not their blue blood status, but their competitive nature that they have suddenly lost over the last half decade plus, where they're not winning in the NCAA tournament. They're not winning in the SEC. They're suffering double-digit loss seasons like several times in a row. They're not good on defense. They're not disciplined. They're injured. Their depth is lacking. They're not as athletic as they used to be. You get a player like Momcilovic who takes your team up into top 15, top 10 status. You have a season. Honestly, it could end up being the best season Pope has had here, and it might end up being the best season Pope has for a hot minute if they truly reach their potential offensively. We'll talk about that in a minute. Getting this one guy could butterfly affect so many things down the road for recruiting, for potential staff additions. Jamal Crawford, what's going on? For just, again, the future of this program if they want to maintain their competitive nature. This is massive for the Cats if he does end up committing. And to have CBS Sports' Matt Norlander say it publicly that he's like, I'm predicting him to go to Kentucky. And Joe Tipton saying Kentucky's the leader and they can close out here soon because they got the money and the fit. It's very exciting stuff. I want to talk about Kentucky's offense fully realizing its potential, the good, some of the bad, and some really interesting quotes that Mark Pope gave to Daryl Bird of Cat's Paws over on 24/7 Sports, because it needs to be reiterated. just how good of an offensive coach Pope is. And now that he's got the personnel to work with that he needs to thrive, Kentucky's got a very high ceiling. They also have a pretty low floor. We'll get to all of that here in just a moment. Before we do it, though, tell you guys about our friends over at Indeed. Sponsor jobs, workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, your inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. So when the pressure is on and you need to make the right hire, it's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. They help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. They've got your back. And here's a stat that says it all for you. In the minute or so that I'll talk to you about Indeed, companies like yours have made 27 hires, 27 over on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves over at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, it's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right. Continuing along here on today's episode of the show, thank you so much for everybody watching in the live chat. If you were listening to the podcast after the fact, would love it wherever you are tuned in. If you subscribed to the show, like the video, leave a review on. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. Please, it would help us out a ton. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, would really appreciate it if you left a 5-star review over there as well. Kentucky's probably going to get Milan Momcilovic. Everything points toward it. They've got the money. They've got the fit. Everything makes sense. They need the shooter more than anybody else. They've got more money than anybody else. Let's go ahead and lock this down. A very interesting conversation between Mark Pope and Daryl Bird over at 24/7 Sports of Cat's Paws over there at 24/7 Sports about Kentucky and their offense. And I want to tie this into what Milan Momcilovic does for this team, because he really does finally give Kentucky's offense the ceiling, the ability to reach their potential that Mark Pope has so desperately craved. We know the gimmick. We know the conversations that were being had about Pope whenever he came here. It's that video that Jordan Sperber put out. We actually had him on the show to discuss it. The video game offense that Mark Pope has. He was genuinely cooking at BYU. They were spraying threes. They were playing with an insane pace. They were flying up and down the floor, and they were fun. They were also very volatile, but we'll get to that in a little bit. First, I want to get to some of the quotes here from, again, this is an article by Daryl Bird. This was posted yesterday morning. Kentucky, under Mark Pope, needs more offensive pace, at least according to their head coach. And so much of what they are going to be able to do this season, so much of their ability to reach their actual ceiling, their true ceiling, is going to revolve around the tempo of which they play the game, in which they play the game. According to Bird, Mark Pope is back on the train of getting 30 to 35 three-point attempts per game, and it starts with Alex Wilkins, Zoom Diallo, and Mason Williams. Direct quote from Pope here. Direct quote from Pope. So much of it is pace. It's going to require a little bit of growth from Zoom and from Alex and from Mason. It's going to require a great commitment from our wings, but I think it gives us a chance to be able to really bring that part of the game back. And I think that's what it leads to. That's what leads to more three-pointers. Ball handling, pace, tempo, attention to detail from your wings. That's what it's going to take for Kentucky to reach their ceiling. Pause here and the action. Do you guys realize, I was looking at points per game statistics a season ago. Do you guys realize that Georgia, of all teams, averaged almost 90 points per game this season? Mike White, the most unsalted butter vanilla coach that I can think of, 90 points per game. Like, where did that come from? Credit to the Bulldogs, credit to him. They were cooking. But playing with more pace, while entertaining, brings a ton of volatility into the equation. And honestly, Pope agrees. He said that pace here is the ultimate disruptor. Quote, teams don't have a chance to get settled as much. And if you do it well, or you run transition offense well, it takes guys off the offensive glass in some cases, which helps you defensively. It's easier on a power play because the rim is usually less protected when you're in transition. When you skip the ball in transition, it's way more confusing because guys aren't really establishing their communication on their rotations yet. The secondary transition would also be really effective if you have to choose to do it. We weren't a great pace team last year. We just weren't because everybody moved down. Maintaining the pace and philosophy of the game was hard for us. So what Pope is telling you is that we've got 3 options at point guard. We got 3 of them. Technically, we've got 3. One of them's going to play shooting guard, and one of them's going to be a freshman that's going to have to learn the ropes pretty quickly if he's going to get a little bit of minutes, going to get a little bit of PT. They will drive whether or not this offense succeeds. Cam Williams and Milan Momcilovic are at this point knowns, right? At least they can be argued that they're known commodities. Justin McBride is a known commodity. All 3 of those guys are really good shooters. One of them is a very good defender. Another one is the best shooter in the country. And the third is a bully ball guy that can put the ball on the floor better than the other 2 combined. Ousmane Ndiaye is also going to be a guy that thrives on the perimeter at 6'11", who can shoot the 3. You've got 4 different players that are going to desperately need your offensive engines in Wilkins and Diallo to crank this thing up to 11, to fly up and down the floor, and to be comfortable doing so. And I think they can. I really think they do. And with more tempo comes more points. We've already talked about it. We've already discussed it a lot on this show since Pope got here. Actually, it was before he got here because Kentucky was flying up and down the floor during Cal's last season with the Cats. More tempo, even if you don't shoot the ball well, will result in more points because you are spending less time per possession, meaning you have more possessions per game, more opportunities to score, more points, more wins, more sleep for me at night, right? That's how simple this can be. But the problem with this is shooting variance. We've seen it. We've seen it in the NBA. If you want to point to the Houston Rockets, a team that thrived on three-point shooting, obliterated teams when they shot the ball well, but they shoot cold in a game that matters, in a game that defines their season, and the season's over. Kentucky, if they are similar conceptually and personnel-wise to their 2024-2025 counterpart, if they shoot the ball well like that team did, with their current personnel and their expectation for pace, they will be virtually impossible to stop every other night. That should excite you, to know that we've got the personnel to fly up and down the floor and to put the ball in the hole at a rate that other teams every other night simply won't be able to keep up with because they don't have the offensive structure, nor do they have the personnel to match. That should be fun. That will be very entertaining. However, shooting variance, while it can help Kentucky and the tempo can help Kentucky, it can also kill them. If you want to compare it to an RPG, some sort of role-playing game, whether it be a video game or something of that nature, you can think of it like a glass cannon, where Kentucky can punch as hard as literally anybody else can punch. But the moment you lay a finger on them defensively, they explode. If they're similar to the 24-25 team, that's how they're going to roll. They're going to be a glass cannon where every fight is a dog fight, and it's just a matter of which team implodes first. Because once you get rolling and the ball starts going in the hole, it is a snowball effect one way or the other. The backcourt personnel here is what should excite you. That sets up players like Milan Momcilovic and Cam Williams and Justin McBride. Because it is more versatile, it is deeper, and it arguably has a higher floor than what we had with Lamont Butler in that first season where Pope was here. You could also argue that the depth Kentucky has on the wings Kentucky's got a much higher floor there. If you want to compare it, and Every episode I open Ken Palm. Every single episode I do it, and I should just leave the tab open on my computer every single day of my life. If you want to compare Braden Hawthorne, Usman Njai, and Cam Williams to Trent Noah, Colin Chandler, Ainsley Almanor, which of that group is more versatile? That bench unit, which is more versatile? It's clearly Njai and Hawthorne and Cam. They also, I think, just have a higher floor as players. If they are similar to the 24-25 team, while they will also be very fun to watch when the ball's going in the hole, and they'll probably just be fun to watch in general, they'll score a ton. There's a chance they bleed points every other night too. Because, again, it goes both ways. If you play with more tempo, there will be more possessions, there will be more variance, and it gives the opponent the opportunity, even if they don't shoot well, more possessions, more points, more volatility. More points does not equal, it's not congruent to like a lack of efficiency. Like Kentucky could still have a pretty dang good defense. Their tempo could just be bad, and they could end up giving up 75 points a game, but it takes a lot to get there. Of course, at the end of the day, I think one of you literally said this in the live chat yesterday, like a more simple term, points win games, regardless how often or easily you come by them. You score more, better chance to win. We ran it by the stats and info department. They said, yeah, if we have more points at the end of the game, things are going to be pretty okay. More opportunities to score, more scoring, etc. The one thing that could really separate this team from last year's team, outside of the wing depth, outside of a player like the first team that Pope had, outside of the wing depth, outside of a player like Momcilovic, if he does end up committing, do we have him? Like, has he committed? Like, has he actually committed? If we break this up to go check Twitter, okay, I don't see it. Not yet. Anyway. The thing that separates this year's team from the first team that Mark Pope had that went to the Sweet 16 is going to be the ability to protect the rim. Malachi Marino should be a better rim protector than Amari Williams was, and Frank Kepnong will be the best rim protector that Mark Pope maybe has ever had, period. Throughout his entire coaching career, Kepnong might be the most physical, dominant presence Kentucky has around the rim defensively. If they can protect the rim, unlike that first squad, who gave up, their two-point defense was 295th nationally. Opponents were shooting 56.5% in conference play. That is brutal inside the arc. Brutal inside the arc. If they can get it to where, even if it's where last year's was, just under 50%, which was top 90 nationally, this is one of the best teams in the SEC. Like, they're going to score a ton. They're going to put a lot of pressure on you with their pace and their tempo and their guard play, and Momcilovic just existing. They have the ability to be one of the best teams in the SEC, and they also have to be the ability to be one of the best teams in the country. The team's ceiling with Milan Momcilovic on it is very, very high. That is realistic. It is logical. It makes a ton of sense, especially when you factor in Kentucky's ability to finally play with more pace. Their floor, at the same time, in my opinion, is very, very low. For a lot of the reasons that we have discussed already on the show, and we will continue to discuss this offseason, Kentucky's guards are going to have to change a ton. Alex Wilkins is the swing factor here. Can he be the shooting guard Kentucky needs him to be? Because as much as we like to talk about, Momcilovic being a ceiling raiser, making Kentucky a top 15, top 10 team, Marino raising this team's floor, Zoom being good, Cam being good, like Kepnong being good, like these are all good players who should hold serve at their respective positions and do what they need to do. But Wilkins, and I've been pretty vocal about this recently, will be the guy that decides just how far Kentucky goes. Because he's being asked to change the most. And that scares me because of potential scheme fit issues, durability things that I've already asked about, or questioned, but again, they're not a reality. It's just I am so snake bit over the fact that every time we bring in guards, they get hurt. But on paper, if Milan Momcilovic does commit to Kentucky, this team has the highest ceiling, realistically speaking, that a Mark Pope team has had, maybe ever, including all of his seasons at BYU. And it's going to have the ability to be the best Kentucky team that we have seen since the first year with Oscar back in 2022. I mean, there's very legitimate reason to be excited about the Cats with their current personnel and their desire to play with more tempo and their desire to just to be more versatile and dynamic because of the personnel that they've gotten. They are just more well-rounded, potentially, than they've ever been under Pope, and more than they've been in a hot minute. I want to ask, though, because I'm comparing this team a lot to the team that went to the Sweet 16 under Pope, what's different? It's two things, in my opinion. Well, real quick, I will note to you guys. Somebody said, what's the concrete source? It is Matt Norlander of CBS Sports, who publicly said it on his show, and then Joe Tipton of On3, who said it behind a paywall, but that went public very quickly. Well, Tipton didn't predict it. He said that Kentucky's the favorite, and they will likely close. Where does it hit first? Milan Socials or Kentucky's? It's going to probably hit for, I would say neither. I would say it's going to be an outlet like CBS or like ESPN or like a Field of 68 that breaks it. I don't know if it's going to be Kentucky's first that gets it, but we'll see. Two things, though, I think that are different about this year's team compared to the first season that Pope was here. For starters, they employ a 6'8", 245-pound forward who can actually put the ball on the floor, in Justin McBride. On the surface, McBride is sort of a happy medium between what Andrew Carr and Ainsley Almanor provided. He can shoot like Almanor did, not to say Carr was a bad shooter at all. He can put the ball on the floor like Carr, and when I say that, I mean he can actually work in the post effectively, because Ainsley never did that. And honestly, he is a better ball handler than Carr because he can work in the open floor, and he can pass a little bit better. The only issue with McBride, according to reports, is his effort and consistency. Apparently, he better bring it with all due respect, and I expect him to. But Kentucky, at their 4 spot, has the type player that Mark Pope needs, and he's even better than what we had in 2024. Just overall more versatile. He's just more versatile. The second thing Kentucky has that first year's team did not have is a shooting guard who can create. It's really cool that Kentucky went out and got 2 creators. They prioritized it. And they've got a shooting guard who can not only handle the ball, but can create at a very, very, very high level. 30+% assist rate is just not something you just stumble across, guys. If you want to take a look at Kentucky's backcourt, you want to take a look at the 2-guard spot, Otega Owe had an 11% assist rate in 2024. Colin Chandler had a 10% assist rate. Trent Noah, who had to play the 2 at times as the season wound down, had a 5.8 assist rate. Kobe Brea, if you want to slide him up, had just an 8% assist rate. Kentucky didn't have a second creator. They had Lamont Butler, they had Kirk Reese, and Kirk Reese was hurt. And Kriisa wouldn't have played shooting guard, he would have played point. So having a 2 who can be that secondary option for you, a Denzel Aberdeen type, if you will, and I'm not saying that Wilkins is Aberdeen, I'm just saying, like, to have a guy who can be the second point guard and have him and your actual point guard on the floor at the same time is going to be really valuable. Again, I said it a minute ago, I think Wilkins will eventually decide just how far this team goes. He's being asked to change a ton. There's a lot of volatility that comes with that. So I want to close with this because we may need to get back on live here in a little bit in case Momcilovic does commit tonight. There are a lot of things to be excited about, right? If Milan does commit. There's a lot of reasons to believe that this team will compete. There are a lot of reasons to believe that this team will play well. They have, in my mind, a very high ceiling. like a very high ceiling. They also have a very, very low floor because there's a lot of reasons to think things just don't work out. Realistically speaking, like they could just all fall apart and Pope could be gone. It's not the most fun for us because I'm assuming you guys would agree with this as well. It's not fun to cover or to watch a team or a program that you can't easily predict week to week. We saw that last season. It's not fun to not have a grip on what the team's going to be night to night because you could look up and they could be playing Kansas in their third game of the season. And you could say, well, on paper, here's kind of how they match up. But if Kentucky's going to play with the tempo that they say they're going to, and they hit 14 threes, the game is over. If they shoot well, the game is over. It really doesn't matter. Like they cannot keep up. Kansas can just realistically, they cannot keep up. If they shoot average, it's a ball game, but also they're going to be taking so many outside shots. You're like, do you even out to an average shooting percentage, or is it really bad? It's simply more volatility. And so it's a little scarier. Hopefully, somebody like Momcilovic added to the roster and playing a decent amount of minutes sort of raises that floor. If Kentucky is going to go the route of shooting variance and living and dying by the three and being a glass cannon, if you're going to get anybody, get a guy who shot a coin flip numbers from deep on insane volume. That'll help. That'll definitely help. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Really appreciate you guys watching. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. Follow me on Twitter at Lance_. Follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast as well. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I may see you guys tonight, but I expect to see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.